Hi there, everyone. I'd like to talk today about a book called The End of Education by Neil Postman, who was a communications philosopher and educator at New York University. He was deeply concerned with the tendency that humans have to see their own technological innovations as a kind of mere static entity or thing. So if I'm, for example, sitting here and there's a television on the wall, and I see this process of me watching television as one of only a linear or definite nature in which there's informational content coming from that technology into me as a repository or a container of knowledge, and I'm not thinking about it as a kind of dynamic medium through which a certain kind of meaning and a certain kind of relatability to information and knowledge is created. Postman said this is a kind of terrible assumption to make about our technologies. He was also really concerned with the issue of the overabundance of information in the modern world, and considering that as a historical development and problem. He certainly wasn't in line with this idea that unending technological progress is necessarily conducive to human insight or to human compassion. But this book, it's a wonderfully written book. It's full of turns of phrases, one of which is kind of a summary point to a lot of his main ideas, is that the thing we need to understand about our technologies like TVs and computers is not how to use them, but how they use us. And even, the title of the book, The End of Education, it's a kind of play on the ambiguity of the meaning of the word end, where it can mean, in kind of a more gloomy or pessimistic tone, the finish of education or the closing of education. But I think more exactly throughout the book he's using the term to mean means, or to mean the purpose of education. And he kind of begins to frame this idea of purpose in education through the notion that teachers are faced with two fundamental issues as educators. The first issue is one of a mechanical nature, so basically this deals with how to orchestrate learning to students, right? The second issue, though, and this is the issue which is pervasive throughout the entire book and which he's really interested in, is one of a metaphysical nature, because it's dealing with really big purposes in education. So he says that this metaphysical aspect of education is what underlies what he calls narratives, or maybe what you could call frameworks, or what he also interestingly synonymously calls gods with a small g. And to paraphrase kind of some of his ideas or his definition about what is a narrative, he says it's a kind of idea with symbolic and transcendent fortitude which enables a learner to situate oneself in relation to that idea. And then out of this relation, or this situating, emerge a number of possible themes which can be seen throughout different types of these narratives. So some of these characteristics and themes, he says, are things like humility, sensitivity, collaboration, empathy for the outsider, and also how to address contradiction in existence. All right? So he starts to talk about some of the really monumental narratives that have been present historically and which have pervaded the American public school system. So, he begins by talking about the science god, or the science narrative of the 16th century onward, in which a lot of thinkers were trying to frame their understanding in terms of measurability of the universe and the cosmos, or kind of trying to extend the meaning of the universe as a divine machine. And then, of course, we get the god of technology, the god of industry, and then he talks about some things which aren't specific to the context of the United States, but which have been extremely important to the development of the country. So these are things like the god of the Protestant ethic, the melting pot narrative, and of course the narrative of democracy, whereby public schools are to play this role of facilitating this idea of liberty, protecting liberty. Okay. But a really intriguing part of the book is when he starts to discuss certain narratives that have taken hold of modern consciousness and thus have kind of really entered into our public school system, right? So the first one he talks about is the god of economic utility. So basically, you serve this god if your activities in life are oriented towards the market paradigm only. And it's he sets it up as a kind of highly dichotomized narrative with religious premises and kind of these very defined terms. So in this narrative, there's a definite idea of good, there's a definite idea of evil, and there's a definite idea of redemption or heaven. So good in this context of economic utility, of course, is organization and efficiency. Bad is inefficiency and sloth, and heaven, of course, is the well-paying job. And it's not as if the problem here is not that well-paying jobs are often a byproduct of higher education, but the problem that Postman sees is to view all learning and activities outside of the market paradigm as something that's wasteful or useless. Okay, and he also, he kind of transitions into what he calls the god of consumption. So in the god of economic utility, whereby a human being is defined by what they do in a professional role, in the god of consumption, of course, the person is defined by what they possess or what they have. So this is the god of consumption, right? He says that there are religious components to the god of consumption as well, and he kind of lays out the terms through advertising. He gives a really interesting example about how these kinds of religious premises are set forth in the idea of consumption through advertising. The example he gives is one of a toothpaste commercial, which sets forth, he says, an idea of sin, an idea of redemption, and an idea of heaven. So the sin in the commercial is when the person is completely unaware of this technology, this toothpaste or this product, so they're ignorant, and in the commercial they appear very gloomy, they're not smiling, they're not showing their white teeth or anything like that, and they're kind of outcasted. The idea of redemption is when they finally get awareness, become aware of this new technology, and they understand that they can use it. And then, of course, the idea of heaven is when they actually use it, and then they're accepted into the community of users of the technology or the product. Okay.